Hey guys, welcome back to the Garage Built. Today we are back working on my 1966 Ford LTD, getting it ready for power tour. In this episode, we're going to start digging into this engine bay and addressing some of the issues that I've accumulated in the last year of driving this thing. Let's get started. So if I'm being honest with you guys, I've already filmed this introduction once. Unfortunately, I lost that somewhere along the way. Here's the deal. Today we're going to start digging into the engine bay. I know for a fact I have a small coolant leak in my intake, and I suspect I might have a small oil leak coming out of my head, amongst having a couple of pinholes suspected in my radiator. So today we're going to dive into this, start breaking it down, and see what we can find. The goal for this is to get all the accessories off, the radiator out, and the intake off, so we can do some quick inspection. We'll send out what needs to be sent out, and then in the next couple of weeks we'll start putting it back together and getting it ready to go. So let's get after it. So as you just saw in that last clip, I just pulled the radiator out. This has a transmission cooler built into it. So I had the two transmission lines that I had to undo. There's one there, capped with a bolt. And there's another one right there. You can see the head of the bolt poking out right there. Those are pretty tough to get off. They're new lines, and the radiator was freshly painted, so it really sealed on there good. I had a bear of a time getting this hose off. I ended up pulling it off at the water pump and twisting it to get it off this end. Word of advice, make sure you always have a catch pan handy. In this case here, I missed all of it, but at least I can say I tried. So I've got the radiator set up over here right now. And as I mentioned in the last video, I suspected that this had a couple of pinholes in it, even though it's a brand new Record radiator. Reason for that was I saw this little crystallized piece of antifreeze right here. I also saw another one now that I got the fan shut off. Whoops. Right there and right there. I also noticed I had a small puddle here, and you can kind of see some crystallized antifreeze here, maybe some above it. But none above that in the area, except for maybe that one, but that's on the wrong fin. So maybe that's related, maybe it's not, I don't know. Either way, I'm going to take this over and have it pressure tested and have any little pinholes repaired. So I guess we can keep moving. Video, the lower radiator hose, my power steering pump belt was a little bit loose, and I started to chowdered up the bottom hose. So here you can kind of see what I'm talking about right in here. It went right down through to the cord. Now fortunately, I don't know if you can see the edge of this, but the cord's about halfway through, so there was still some meat left in this before it would have blown up. But the cord is a lot of the strength of this. When without it, you just have that inner rubber membrane. This would have eventually ballooned up a little bit before it popped. So this is a good catch now. Get it done out of the way before we go on this road trip. Yeah, so I'm pulling the intake off. So the reason I'm taking all the accessories off the front right now is because I need to get the water pump off to get the intake off. Not so much to pull the intake off itself, but more so for the convenience of putting it back on. So, give you a better idea what I'm talking about. So, obviously my water pump, my intake manifold, there's a little water bypass here for when you need to circulate water, but your thermostat's still closed. On either end of this, there's a little, probably 1/2 inch, 3/4 nipple, and those are aligned with this little stubby, maybe 2-inch length of hose. When I put this on the first time, the intake, to clarify, I left the water pump on, and all you have to do for that is kind of swing the intake up and then come into the hose. But when you do that, you have to be very careful not to either knock your gaskets out of the front and back valleys, or in my case, I had just siliconed them with a 1/4 inch bead of RTV. So when you swing in like that, you risk either knocking your gasket out, or in this case, smudging this one, and then creating a either thin spot in your seal, or knocking it out altogether, leading to a leak. So by pulling the water pump off, I can set my intake on square this time, guarantee a solid seal, and then once that's on and set, I can take my water pump, line up these two nipples with the hose in between, and set everything in place. That way I'm not playing with angles and dangles and trying to get everything aligned, to save a step, especially since I'm pulling that out anyway. So this will make it a lot easier. I just noticed that when I pulled the radiator out, one of my little rubber insulators came out with it. This is what it's supposed to look like, kind of like what it's supposed to look like. It's just a U-shaped channel that the radiator sits in on the bottom. That way you don't have metal on metal. Kind of insulates it, protects it. They're supposed to have little nipples on it that poke through into little bolt-on brackets in my front core support here. These ones sheared right off when I pulled the radiator out. I had to order a set anyway for my uppers. You can see them here. I never replaced these because at the time they were back ordered. So these are the original ones, and you can see they're quite blown out, but the little tab stayed on, so I don't know. Either way, I got to order a new one now for the bottom, so I might as well replace these ones and lock this thing to place. You'll also note that I'm making it a point to leave my air cleaner and carburetors on for as long as possible. My reason for that is, as I'm working on stuff and taking stuff apart, I'm trying to avoid dumping stuff down my intake manifold, especially without knowing, and then doing long-term damage. So keep everything tight up top so nothing gets in until the very, very end, I guess, is my goal for the time being. So I was hoping it wouldn't have to pull the power steering pump off, because that sucks to realign. But it looks like I'm going to have to. So what I tend to do, just as an FYI, whenever I take a bolt out, try to put it back into its place before you forget where it goes. So my alternator lines up almost perfect each time, so there's no washers underneath. There's just a flat and a lock washer on the outside. My power steering pump is shimmed out all sorts of ways to get it close to aligned. It never really goes perfect. So right now there's 3 washers in the bottom, 4 on the top on the head, a thick one on the top here, and a thick one on the bottom. I think nope, no washer on the bottom. Scratch that. So I guess we'll have to pull that off next. So it is currently Monday night. Everything you've seen up until this point was Friday night after work. So I'm just now taking a chance to inspect everything that I've done up until now. This is that oil leak I had mentioned. I know I had seen this before. It's coming out of the valve cover. But I was more concerned about, you can kind of see the discoloration through here and along this edge. And I wasn't sure if this oil leak was coming from the head or the intake gasket. I'm pretty sure now that it's coming from the intake, right in this corner. It's a common leak spot. You can kind of see it. The coolant leak I was talking about is in here. I don't know how well this is going to come through. If it looks like garbage, I'll put a picture in. But I'm pretty sure that it's this gasket here is leaking coolant past it. There's a channel on either side where the coolant comes in through the thermostat and separates and goes down through the heads. So this is the main reason that we are where we are at. So I guess let's keep digging. So this is my distributor, which I just pulled out. You'll also notice that I just pulled out the rod that drives my oil pump, which fits into a cam or a slotted piece on the bottom of the distributor. So historically, from the factory, this would have come with a little clip that would have held this in place so it doesn't fall out. Those always get lost, and what happens is you're pulling your distributor out and pop, this falls out, goes in your oil pan, and it's gone forever. What I've done, and you can kind of see here if I get it nice and close, is when I put it in last, I put a dollop of RTV on the end and stuck that all up in this business, and that holds it in place, so you have a better chance of pulling this out in one shot and not losing your distributor rod. So earlier I mentioned the importance of covering everything up when you pull something off and just try to protect your engine as best as possible. And this is why. So I just pulled this front nut off, and that is where it landed. Now if I hadn't plugged off the distributor hole, this would have fallen straight down through the valley and then into the crank oil pan area, likely lost forever and potentially sucked back in. So just use your head when you're working on this stuff. So here's a quick tip. We get ready to pull this intake off. I already got the valve covers off. On these FE engines, the push rods go through the intake manifold. So even if you're just pulling the intake off, you have to go and pull your whole rocker assembly off. Now, I was always taught that each push rod is mated to a rocker arm and a lifter. So you're not supposed to mix up top and bottom or any push rod for any other push rod. So what I tend to do is I go along the top while they're still in, and I take a Sharpie or a paint pen, and I just mark each one. The side with the number on it is your top, and each one corresponds to a certain position. 1 through 8 on the passenger bank, and 9 through 16 on the driver's bank. So, little tip, and it keeps you organized and lets you know which one's which when you put them back together. Another little tip, like I said, I try to keep everything organized, put everything back where it came from. To keep left and right, driver's side, passenger side separated, I always, out of habit, put a zip tie on the passenger side rocker arm assembly. Keeps them separate, you know which one's which. Tail. So the intake is off, as you can see. Just doing a quick visual inspection. I got some paper towels on the other side. When I pulled the intake off, some water came out. But it's probably a good thing we did this when we checked this when we did, because I'm seeing, I don't know if you can see it in there, there's some white, some foam. Like, I'll zoom a little bit for you. Zoom in a little bit. You can kind of see it in there. And there's some matching on this side. None back there, thankfully. But I think these water ports, which are there, the little one in the back, that one, and that one, I think they were starting to weep into the oil. So it's probably a good thing we caught this when we did, or else this could have been a bigger blowout than it was. So I think we're going to wrap it up here for tonight. We're stripped down, everything's off, and then going forward, I'm going to bring my radiator over and have it pressure tested and sealed. I got to clean all this off, peel these gaskets off. This can start going back together. Ideally, we'll get basically a full engine back together by the time the radiator comes back. I can throw my accessories back on and then slide this back in, and we should be good to go. So let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you next time.